So this is the second week of the Plugable Office Hours, where we talk about technology and how it's applied, especially related to USB and computer peripherals. Um, we're Plugable Technologies. We're a company with 120 different USB devices that we sell on Amazon and through Ingram Micro Distribution and around the world. And we're one of the leading brands for especially laptop docking stations and some of the more complex type devices. As we all know, kind of over the last, really the last decade, laptops and tablets and phones have been getting thinner and lighter. Where laptops might have had a lot of ports previously, they're really going down to just a few ports, usually USB-C ports. And then it's by connecting either adapters or docks to those USB-C ports that you get all the other connectivity back. So really kind of amazing technology, great technology. USB-C is this kind of unifying port, but it can be very confusing for consumers. And so, this is kind of a chance for you to ask any questions that you have about these kinds of technologies. And for us to try to help. So if you want to just email office hours at plugable.com, what we're actually doing kind of technology-wise here is we have a Zoom meeting that we can kind of let you into to join me here right on this live call and ask the technical question that you have, and I'll try my best to answer it. And would love to have some of you join. So while we're waiting to see, what questions we've got, wanted to talk about a really kind of an interesting product that we launched last week. It's one of a new generation of Thunderbolt 3 docking stations that is trying to solve some of these issues with compatibility confusion. But it's interesting how complex USB-C can be when you just want to plug something in and you expect it to work. So in the last 2 weeks, we launched the Plugable TBT3 UDC1. Okay, that's the name of the product. It's a Thunderbolt 3, kind of a mini dock, not too large, but it has its own power adapter. It charges the laptop, as you can do with USB-C. It also has 2 DisplayPort displays off of it. And it's actually an amazing set of technology. It's really this second generation of Thunderbolt 3 product. The first generation was built on an Intel chip called Alpine Ridge, and this is the first. This is part of the first wave of Titan Ridge generation Thunderbolt 3 products. And this particular product, what it does is it actually has a very complex circuit inside that allows you to have 2 displays in more cases than you've been able to have before with Thunderbolt 3. And Titan Ridge itself as a chipset supports working both on USB-C laptops that don't have Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 3 laptops. So in other words, the first generation of Thunderbolt 3 really didn't have backward compatibility. If you bought a Thunderbolt 3 dock, you needed a Thunderbolt 3 laptop. In the second generation Thunderbolt 3 chipset from Intel, this Titan Ridge chipset, Intel added that backward compatibility. But USB-C, DisplayPort over USB-C, only supports a single display. So I just said, though, that this dock has 2 outputs, and it tries to, does some fancy stuff to be able to support those 2 outputs on almost every USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 laptop. So how does it do that? Well, actually, inside the dock, what it's doing is, if it connects to a Thunderbolt 3 system, great. You almost in not totally universally, because it's not required by the spec, but in most cases, you're going to have 2 displays over Thunderbolt 3. Now, however, on USB-C, in every case, in terms of DisplayPort over USB-C streams, you're only going to have 1. But DisplayPort has this interesting technology that's supported on Windows and not on Mac, called MST, multiple stream technology. that allows you to take a single kind of DisplayPort connection and run several video streams over it. And so in this case, the stock design has MST support for 2 displays. So if you're on a Windows laptop that supports Thunderbolt 3, as many of, for example, the newer kind of higher end Dell Inspiron and Latitude laptops have for 2 or 3 years now, you're going to be getting 2 displays with Thunderbolt 3. If, for example, you're using a Microsoft USB-C product where Microsoft actually has not adopted USB or Thunderbolt 3 at all, you only have USB-C. Well, in that case, you're still going to get 2 displays with slightly different specs, but 2 displays because all Windows systems support this MST technology, and the dock has that as kind of a backup path. If it's not Thunderbolt 3, and it's just USB-C, we'll use MST if the system supports it. Now we want to, one of our goals is to, basically you plug it in and it works. And already, you could tell this is starting to sound, even though it's more compatibility than Thunderbolt 3 products have had before, it still sounds pretty complicated. Well, on Mac, it is complicated because Macs don't support MST. The good thing is that Apple has adopted Thunderbolt 3 fairly aggressively and fairly cleanly. So they had a generation of MacBooks, the original single port MacBooks from 2015, 2016, that were USB-C only. And on those, these docks would only support 1 display. But everything after that, all the MacBook Pros that ever had USB-C ports and all the newer entry MacBooks and all the other Mac systems that have USB-C, those USB-C ports support Thunderbolt 3. And so again, the dock is going to be able to support 2 displays. So wow, a lot of different technologies involved, and it's all basically so that you as a consumer can say, okay, I want a dock that does 2 displays, and here you go. Here's a dock that does 2 displays and does it in a bunch of these different cases. Now, is that the only way to get 2 displays on a Windows PC or a MacBook? And the answer is no. For 10 years, Plugable has been selling docking stations using what's called DisplayLink technology. So DisplayLink works in a totally different way, where in the dock or in the graphics adapter, there's all the video memory is there. And it's actually refreshing the screen constantly from the adapter without the PC even needing to be involved or the Mac needing to be involved. And then what you have on in Windows or in Mac OS is a software driver that is detecting changes to the pixels on a virtual screen, sending them just the changes over USB, because USB, if you're going to send it over as regular USB data, USB actually doesn't have enough throughput to refresh the screen all the time. So you're just sending the pixels that are changing, updating what's called a frame buffer, that memory that's in the dock or the display, and now it's refreshing the screen. So if you buy a DisplayLink dock and you're looking at just like a static browser window with nothing changing, there's actually nothing being transferred over USB at that point. It's only as you drag that window or scroll or something like that, that now data is being sent over. That technology works with any USB device as long as there's a driver for it. So, and the drivers exist for Windows 10 and OS X with slightly different limitations on each of them. And there's been a lot of changes on the Mac side, which has caused us to be conservative about kind of recommending that technology. And in fact, right now it's going, while it's kind of very mature and very performant and stable on Windows, on Mac, it's been transitioning from being a driver to being an application that you install from the App Store, which ultimately will be a good thing, but it's kind of in the middle of that transition. So we're not currently recommending our DisplayLink-based docks as a solution to get to 2 or 3 or 5 displays on Mac, but on Windows, it's great for all those scenarios, in fact, up to 6 displays. And that's an alternative if you're worried about some of these issues with USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 compatibility. We have DisplayLink-based docks that come with both USB-C and USB-A connectors so that you can take a DisplayLink-based dock that you know is going to work and plug it into a laptop that's 10 years old or a laptop that's 1 year old, and it's going to work on any of them. And the good examples of those docks are our models, the USB or the UD3900H and the UD6950H. That's basically our 2K and 4K docks that come with both USB-A and USB-C connectors. And you don't need to worry about any kind of USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 compatibility details like you would with some of the higher performance, but docks that do rely on those technologies. So there you go. So wow, a lot of details there, and I would love to see if we get any questions to kind of dig in more or look at those details from a couple different angles. Okay, so we have a question in text in the chat. So I work between a PC and a Mac, and I have to change the cable between each device each time. Is there any way I can switch between the devices while using one screen? Okay, that's a great question. And it's good that we kind of talk through this difference between the way DisplayPort over USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 work, which is they're constantly running the video signals, kind of high throughput, high frequency video signals over the USB-C cable, versus the DisplayLink technology, which is kind of just sending the change data, the screen, the pixels that are changing, and otherwise actually is not running much over the USB cable, and kind of using just more standard USB data in that case. And the reason why is because so switching this kind of high frequency signal, it can be done, but it's much more difficult. One of the characteristics of USB-C and Thunderbolt 3 is generally the cable lengths have to be pretty short in order to be able to refresh the screen with a high frequency over this USB cable. And for that same reason, putting a switch in between, if you wanted to kind of switch that video output signal from one computer to another to share, to basically switch a monitor back and forth, it could be done. But it's actually going to be tricky and error prone. However, on the DisplayLink solution side of this, where you're just simply doing regular USB data, it's very doable. And in fact, we do it all the time, and we've got products that support it. So we have a product called the USB 3 Switch 2. And what it does is it takes a single USB 3 device and switches it between two laptops. And they can be a Windows laptop and a Mac laptop, and they can be a DisplayLink device. So the question that we got in text there was, can I switch with a press of a button, a display from one laptop to the other? If, for example, I'm a graphic designer and I need to work on Windows and Mac. So, and the answer is yes. So if you want a solution that does only that, you buy a pluggable USB 3 Switch 2, and you buy one of our DisplayLink based graphics adapters like our UGA 3000, which is a USB 3 DisplayLink graphics adapter that supports any of the common monitor types, including VGA, DVI, and HDMI. The combination of those two products will allow you to connect any display, for example, an HDMI display, and be able to, with a press of the button on the pluggable USB 3 Switch 2, switch that display between your Mac and your Windows machine. And you can take it a step further. You can actually switch a whole docking station and all of the USB devices that are attached to that docking station. So instead of that UGA 3000, that graphic adapter, you could actually buy a dock like the pluggable UD3900, which is our best-selling docking station. It's a USB 3 docking station based on DisplayLink technology. Plug that in to the USB 3 Switch 2, and then a cable to each of your Windows and Mac laptops, and just press a button. And not just the two displays on the dock, but all the other USB devices on the dock will switch back and forth. So, for example, if you're a programmer and you want to kind of test or develop on two totally different platforms, you plug in, that setup with the pluggable switch and the pluggable dock. You can connect a keyboard and mouse and an extra display, and just press a button, and the keyboard, mouse, and display will all switch back and forth. And so it's a pure. If anybody is technical and they know the term KVM, it's this keyboard video mouse, and it was a common solution in the past for having this kind of setup where you've got more than one computer and then switching a keyboard, monitor, and mouse back and forth. Now you can do it with a pure USB setup, very kind of standards based and very flexible. And we have thousands of users who do that by just combining our products together in that way. So there you go, kind of an answer to that question. Okay, we have a question. Cable management is an important part of work from home, and that's absolutely right. I suggest configuring that before getting too involved. This also helps with loose cables getting caught on something, ripped out, etc. Yeah, and I think yes, a lot of people are conceptually attracted to wireless solutions. They think, why are there not wireless displays? Well, and the answer is that for there's certain things you want to be reliable. And I've actually been involved with wireless docks, for example, for not quite 20 years, but almost 15 years, going back to work when I was on the Windows team, working on ultra wideband docking stations in the early 2000s. And that technology, and then also all the successive technologies since then, have really been problematic with wireless. It usually starts with it's difficult. When in an office environment, if you have a device that's wireless, which PC does it go with? Well, there's usually this kind of device discovery and association and authentication process that goes into that. And that's pretty big step. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than plugging in a cable. And then on top of that, you have the reliability issue of plugging in a cable. You're able to get very high speed, very high throughput signaling extremely reliably. Whereas, for example, with wireless, it was not uncommon, for example, with ultra wideband technology, to be kind of sitting there comfortably a few feet away, from your laptop with this kind of ultra wideband wireless setup, and somebody walks in between you and your computer, and you lose the connection, your screens go down, and all this stuff just because somebody walked by. Yeah, and so once you've decided, as really pretty much anybody should right now, to stick with wired for these sorts of setups, you want to have a nice cable management setup. And I think one of the great things about USB-C is because it is a cable and a connector that can do it all, and especially with Thunderbolt 3, that's their motto, they can do it all with one cable. It's just a single cable back to your laptop for doing all of these different devices and for charging your laptop. And so it's just really, as far as cable management goes, really easy because you just need to have that one cable exposed. You could tuck everything else back behind your desk and just unplug and go, come back and just plug a single cable in, and up pops two monitors, keyboard, mouse, your printer, everything else that's connected via USB. And it's really nice. Okay, great. So any suggestions for a dock that will give me a second display on my iMac 2017, which is Thunderbolt 3 capable? That's a great question and an interesting scenario. We often talk about docking stations being so important now as laptops have gotten thinner and lighter, and you just don't have the ports available. So you've got to extend the capability of that laptop with a dock. The iMac's interesting because that is one of Apple's computers that is it's a screen with a computer built in, and it's kind of big, and so it actually has a decent number of ports on it. But there are limitations. If you want to connect, one or two extra displays, if you want a bunch of regular USB-A ports, they don't. You're not going to have all of those ports on the iMac, and so the iMac 2017 does support Thunderbolt 3, and so that's it's anything connected via Thunderbolt 3 is really operating at a performance level that is equivalent to anything Apple might have designed into that computer. For example, we sell, we're one of the leaders of Thunderbolt 3 products. We have over 12 certified products in Thunderbolt 3 because it is a 40 gigabit per second, very difficult standard to comply with, both from a design level and a manufacturing level. They have a really strong certification program, totally different than USB, which has a certification program, but it's optional. With Thunderbolt 3, it's a mandatory certification program. And so there's a limited number of brands that sell Thunderbolt 3 products, and we're one of those leading brands that has the largest product line. One of those products is a Thunderbolt 3 external hard drive. It comes in half terabyte, terabyte, and 2 terabyte sizes. And those drives actually have a performance that is better than the drive that is in the Mac, or very close to it, but higher. So I wouldn't say that it's like dramatically faster because the drives in the Mac are pretty good, but we actually are able to put into those external drives faster SSDs. And then that Thunderbolt 3 connection is not a gating factor at all. The drive is limited by the speed of the SSD. So because our SSD is faster than the SSD in the Mac, and Thunderbolt 3 is able to, pass through or perform at the full performance of the SSD, our external drives actually benchmark higher. Wow, you can plug in something external to the Mac and it actually performs better than something internal. Well, the same thing with the question on a dock, attaching a dock to an iMac. So if you take our current flagship Thunderbolt 3 docking station, the TBT3 UDV, which has been out for about 2 years now, and you could read the reviews, got a great reviews, this beautiful, sleek aluminum docking station that really looks nice sitting next to an iMac. You're going to get the 2 displays off of that for 2 external displays. You're going to get a whole bunch of USB ports. You're going to get audio, like for a headset like this, and so getting kind of all that additional connectivity that you don't necessarily get with the iMac, because the iMac, there's a limit on how many ports they have, and you could use Thunderbolt 3 to basically get as many ports as you need externally connected to the iMac. Great. Okay, so let's see. Are there any upcoming pure USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 KVMs? Okay, great question. We were talking about KVMs earlier. So with Thunderbolt 3 KVMs, I think would be actually quite difficult. I don't suspect they'll be coming because of the signal integrity issues. You're not going to be able to do that kind of just by passively connecting wires. I mean, one of the things that makes our USB 3 Switch 2 so reliable is it's really just a physical connection. You're literally taking the USB 3 data lines and just moving them back and forth. With Thunderbolt 3, because it's a 40 gigabit per second bus, where the only chipset vendor today that are, I mean, not quite the only, but almost the only chipset vendor you have that supports it is Intel. That's just because it's so difficult to maintain signal integrity and not have errors, create connection problems and data problems, unless you've got a relatively short connection length with relatively few hops. In the laptops, even within a laptop, when you have the Thunderbolt 3 chipset that's sitting on the motherboard of a laptop, even to go just a few inches to the port that's at the edge of the laptop, many laptop makers are having to put in signal boosters and repeaters in order to have that port support Thunderbolt 3 properly. So having a switch to switch Thunderbolt 3 is not too likely. USB-C, which operates at slightly lower throughputs, it's running over the exact same USB-C cable, but not in a sense running it as hard, because the maximum data rates are going to be 10 gigabits per second, about a quarter of the max Thunderbolt 3 data rates. I haven't seen them actually yet, USB-C KVMs. They might actually be out there. But I think that both the cost of them and the reliability of them are going to be such that in many cases you're going to be better off kind of keeping it simple and sticking with USB 3 rather than having a pure USB-C KVM. Okay, great. Let's do maybe one more question. Well, there's a comment here, which is in the cable management that a surge suppressor is a nice thing to have too, and that's absolutely right. We don't have any surge suppressors that we sell globally, but we have one of the most popular high-function surge suppressors here in the United States. It's called the PS12 USB 2, and we've got two models: the PS12 USB 2B and the PS12 USB 2.5. And the 2B is a 6-foot cord with 12 AC ports and 2 USB ports with great surge suppression. Very fast clamping. If there's something goes wrong, there's a lightning strike or a short, it will protect your devices on there. The USB-C port or the USB ports, I'm sorry, the USB-A ports are charging ports. And then that PS12 USB 2.5 is really an interesting one. That's the exact same product, but with a 25-foot cable back to the wall. Tell you the story of actually why we developed that product. We'd been selling the PS12 USB 2B for years, and huge success, very popular product. And we used them ourselves in our own office. And we would have fire inspectors come in every half year, every year. And they would come into us, and we'd always have to scramble when the fire inspectors were coming because we had all of these power strips that we had plugged a power strip into the wall, kind of brought it halfway into our room of cubes, and then plugged another power strip in to that power strip. And that's how we connected the last set of cubes or whatever. Well, it turns out that that's a fire violation. So we kept having to quickly unplug all of our power strips before the fire inspector would get there. And I thought, we can solve this problem. So we took this kind of beefy, it was already a fairly big box, this beefy, really well-designed surge suppressor, and we extended out to a 25-foot cable. And now we're able to run straight from the wall, even to the middle of our big room of cubes, and have just a single cord, which, without any daisy chaining, which makes the fire marshals happy. So that's the story behind that. And as far as I can tell, still a fairly unique product on the market. Okay, last question for this office hour. I have a pluggable UD3900. That was that dock I was mentioning. That's our most popular one. Could I connect a third monitor while still keeping all the other functionality of the docking station? And the answer is yes. So one of the really kind of magical things about DisplayLink technology, which is what is inside the UD3900, is it's just using regular USB data transfers. Whereas Thunderbolt 3 and USB and DisplayPort over USB-C, they're doing kind of a hardware level fancy stuff. And we talked about some of this stuff last week. They're actually negotiating for ownership of wires within the USB-C cable, doing a software negotiation for hardware ownership, and then running natively these in the case of DisplayPort over USB-C, DisplayPort signaling over that wire. In the case of Thunderbolt, this Intel signaling that's super high throughput. In the case of DisplayLink technology, it's just sending regular old USB packets, exactly like your USB hard drive sends, or lots of other USB devices. And the magical thing about that is, just like any other USB device, you can plug any number of them in. You could plug, 50 DisplayLink devices into a Windows or Mac system, and at a hardware level and at a USB level, they would all work. Now, the graphics systems within Windows and Mac have limitations, and for Windows, it's actually there's a number of things going on. We recommend on Windows a limit of 6 displays per per Windows system. There are scenarios where you can actually get to more, and if you go back through some of our older videos, you can find us demonstrating a few of those scenarios, but 6 is safe. And then on the Mac side, I mentioned earlier in this office hour that they're going through a transition right now from being a driver solution for DisplayLink to being something where Apple's supporting it in a better way, where DisplayLink software is just something that's in the App Store. Well, right now in that transition, they're at 2 displays and they're transitioning soon to 4. So I guess technically the answer to the question of can I add that 3rd display is absolutely yes on Windows, and on Mac, either now or soon, as soon as the 4 display support is ready for the DisplayLink software. But how do you actually do it? So, okay, well, what do I need? What do I need to buy to be able to do it? Okay, so you already have your UD3900 docking station from Plugable. It already supports 2 displays, so you're just off by 1 display. What do? You just can simply buy another DisplayLink-based USB adapter. So I mentioned earlier in the call with the switch, where you could switch a single display back and forth. I mentioned our UGA 3000 graphics adapter. You could just buy one of those, plug that into the UD3900, and boom, you have 3 displays. Or you can buy one of our other DisplayLink-based USB adapters. We have a UGA 2K HDMI, a UGA 4K HDMI. Basically, they're very similar kind of inside on all of those, and you can just look at the specs to see. We just have kind of 2K and 4K models of each one. I often recommend the 2K models, interestingly, because unless you really need the 4K resolution, you're actually going to get kind of more reliable performance with DisplayLink devices with 2K screens and 2K devices. The lower, because you're transferring all the changing pixels over USB, having that kind of more standard 2K resolution and not really pushing the pixel limit with 4K is actually helpful in terms of having a very snappy display that is pretty much indistinguishable from any other monitor that you have. Okay, great. Well, that's it for our second Plugable Office Hour. Would love to hear kind of any feedback you have about these that we're doing. This is the second one. We're going to be doing it again next week. Do you like the format? Do you not like the format? Do you have any questions that you want to get to us ahead of time so we can make sure to answer them? Just email them or email us anytime at officehours@plugable.com. And if you have any questions at all about our products, as you're hearing about some of these things that are possible that you can do, and you're just not quite sure whether your particular laptop can do it or what the right product is to buy, just email us at support@plugable.com. We are unusual in that we have an all US-based support team, which, by the way, is all working from home right now and actually has been for the last 8 weeks. We're all here in Redmond, Washington, kind of in one of the tech capitals here in the U.S. The same people who develop our products are the ones who are going to be answering your emails when you ask for support. So you're going to get extremely knowledgeable answers. This is not we don't even have an overseas call center, which is really unusual for an electronics company. So please, make use of that fact and reach out for help, because we'd love to help you get a really great desk setup that makes use of this really a lot of amazing technology. Can't see it. I guess I could kind of turn it to look. I have a 2-monitor setup in addition to my laptop here, and in addition to keyboard and mouse and a hard drive docking station. So I can't live without my multiple monitors, so we certainly want to help you get set up with a similarly nice setup. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week at the next Plugable Office Hours.